I'm going to begin with a poem. You're going to have to help me with this. There was an old man on a roof who said, I'm entirely aloof. I cannot explain what is wrong with my brain, but I feel I have absolute...
Proof.
Proof, very good. And how do we know that it's proof and not something else? Well, we know because of meter. You know, it could be magaloof, but it wouldn't fit. We know because of rhyme, it's got to go oof. We know because of the plot of the story, and we know because of the style. And these poetic techniques come under the heading of mythos. Mythos. So we're going to be talking about poetry and magic and how they fit together. And in fact, our oldest and most important, most powerful scriptures come down to us in the form of poetry, whether that's the Vedas or the Old Testament or any of these really, really old traditions. The oldest writings we have in all kinds of different cultures are actually poetry, not prose. So that was what people wrote down, what sounded right, not what was particularly logical. Mythos and logos. Today we're going to be talking about mythos. And Mr. Crowley says this. He says, magic is an example of mythopoeia in that particular form called disease of language. Come back to disease of language. But the making of myths, mythopoeia, Crowley obviously mythologized himself in quite a big way and was a poet, obviously. And so magic, what happens when we do magic? We are putting things in order. I'm actually going to come back to that. Let's have a look at the mage card. He bears in his right hand the style, in his left the papyrus, and there you can see it on the card. Of all the weapons that the magician is juggling, these are the highest, these are the most important. And if we look on the tree of life there, and look at the rest of the quote, he is the messenger of the gods. He transmits their will by hieroglyphs. The messenger of the gods. The gods sit up there in Keta, and he transmits their will by hieroglyph. A pen is a way of focusing everything into a particular line, a particular glyph, a particular hieroglyph, let's say. We can talk in terms of chokmah, or will, or wisdom. He transmits their will by hieroglyphs, intelligible to the initiate. So they need to be, you need to be initiated, or you need to have a degree of understanding to understand these glyphs. And of course, Bina, Sphere 3, is about understanding. He talks about Keta, Chokmah, and Bina in terms of the word, the speaking of the word, and the hearing of the word, or the writing of the word, and the reading of the word. So think about that, all that power of Chokmah, directed down through a channel, like a pen, into some kind of glyph, which is then understandable in our experience. And I would say that understanding life, understanding magic, is a case of understanding the poetry which permeates experience, whether that is in rhyme or meter or plot or whatever it might be. Next one. So here's a good word for the magician, abracadabra, or abracadabar, where dabar in Hebrew means word, or in Aramaic, I think someone might object. So dabar means word. That phrase, abracadabra, means I create as I speak. Dabar also means phrase. So think, well, what is a word? A word is a collection of letters, a collection of symbols in a certain meaningful order. And a phrase is a collection of words in a certain meaningful order. And what do we do when we do magic? Well, this is a invocation of Venus here. So we're collecting symbols and putting them into order. So how many candles do we have? 7, not 8, not 6. And they're green, not blue, not red. And with our magics, we collect all our symbols into a certain meaningful order, and we focus it down to a single point, just like that pen. Just like the wand of the magician, firing intention towards his enemy and turning him into a frog or something like that. Spellcraft. Spelling is putting letters into order, and spells is what we cast. Grimoires, grammar, I won't go over this, it's boring. Well, it's not boring, but you'll know it anyway. Dabar also means matter or affair, and it also means thing, which is quite interesting. I believe it's the only language where the same word means thing and word. And what are we talking about here? Dabar. The root meaning is setting in a row, arranging in order. So here we are at the beach, all these shells in chaotic arrangement, and we're going to set them in order and see what happens. And we get something. And we get something, we can name it. And what is it? Well, it's a line, and there we've got something. But now, is that line in our heads, or is that line on the beach? Is it a word in our heads? Is it a thing on the beach? And now we start to blur the lines between what's inside and what's outside, what is above and what is below, another way of looking at it. Philo talks about logos as, which means a word, glue and a chain which connects together and fastens everything. So there you can see those shells connected into a coherent thing, which is a line. But he also says in the following chapter, it's also the divider of all things. So logos divides as well. So we have a line, which is a connection. We also have a this side and a that side. When we get to the question, is this in our heads or is it in the world? People take those lines very seriously. In fact, they fight and kill each other over where those lines are, right? Magic. And a definition is, definis, putting an edge on something. So there we are. And we do this, we can't really stop ourselves from doing this, you know. When we see something, we already in our minds define it. All right. So back to this thing about the initiate. This is the initiation of Bina. And I'm not really talking about the particular rite of the OTO. I'm talking about the internal process which is behind that, which is getting out. And Crowley talks about this particular path, moving to 3, moving to the Magister Templi, and understanding as that the task is to comprehend the existing universe in accordance with the magician's own mind. And the oath is, I will interpret every phenomenon as a particular dealing of God with my soul. So this is a way of going through your life, pulling out order between all the different things that happen. All right? It's obviously this is a path to absolute madness if you do it wrong. So another task of this particular initiation is to, let's say, give up on the pleasures of life, right? Because if we get very attached to something, a particular way of seeing the world, a particular arrangement, then we can see it where it isn't. Crowley talks about our method is science, our aim is religion. Yeah? Yeah. So this is anyone can do this. You should do this. Situate yourself and interpret everything you see, and as some act in a particular dealing of God. Some of the hieroglyphs. Back to this idea of hieroglyphs. When we do a spell, we put things in order and we send it out to the universe, and then we expect it to come back in a certain way, resembling our spell. All right, and that's a rhyme. I'm going to show you some rhymes later. The next initiation towards in Chokmah, of the Magus, Crowley describes it like this. He describes his days of Chokmah. So he's traveling in America, and he has these massive changes of fortune periodically. So, for example, he gets down off a mountain, he hears about news of the Great War, everything changes. And then later he gets an article published in Vanity Fair, everything changes for him. And then he meets Ratan Devi, everything changes, he meets someone else. And he's looking back, he's trying to work out what's going on here. And he looks back into his magical diaries, and he realizes that it happens every 73 days. And 73 is the number of Chokmah. And he says, gosh, isn't that curious? And here we have something I mentioned before, meter. We have a rhyme, we have a certain rhythm in our magic. So he's uncovered the meter, and he's uncovered the rhyme, because every 73 days, something which resembles the thing above happens, which is what a rhyme is. And he says this, quaint as it sounds, I found myself discovering an almost stupefying physical resemblance to diverse symbolic animals in those individuals whose influence on me during their appointed period was paramount. So he's going through his life, he meets, for example, Ratan Devi. She is the snake. I think she's a snake. One of them is a snake, one of them is a camel, one of them is a toad, and these people he encounters, he describes it in his book in terms of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, encountering all of these animal-headed gods and going through certain stages of the initiation. So he finds people, this is plot, again back to the idea of mythos. Here we have these figures, characters. This fact appears arbitrary. He's talking about both the number and the characters. This fact appears arbitrary and irrelevant, but it forms part of the symbolic language in which the proto-human intelligence who's control the initiate communicate with him. Again, we're talking about hieroglyphs. And he says when this initiation is done, these people stop looking like cats and snakes to him. So I want to talk now about 3 different, let's say, magical traditions I've been involved with. One which was where we didn't see or respect the kind of poetry, the kind of myth we were engaging with, and 2 where I did. So the first one, Keta Chaos. Back in the day, somebody taught me how to do a spell and I laughed in his face, but I did it anyway and it worked, and I did it again and it worked, and I joined his cult called the Church of Animethics. I was 21, I didn't know any better. We did a lot of ketamine. No disrespect to ketamine, I don't think I'll do it again. Anyway, we did a lot of ketamine, and it's a fantastic magical opener. Opening's not a problem really, closing is the problem. I think we did an invocation of Baphomet, of course, as you do. I remember deciding, what are we going to invoke? And I said, let's invoke Ronald McDonald. And they went, no, man, that guy's far too powerful, let's stick with Satan or someone. Anyway, invoked Baphomet. It didn't go into the particular horse we were trying to put it into. It went into my girlfriend at the time instead. She had a terrible time. Really bad time all night, couldn't get into her door, had to wake up the neighbours at 3 o'clock in the morning to work out how to use the door key. But then she took a big line at a party a good few months later, and she got kidnapped by Baphomet in her visions. At this point I was actually carrying her, it was a squat party, and I was carrying her off the dance floor where she collapsed. And the Baphomet came to her as a big throbbing pink penis, and then put her through an experience she'd actually had. She'd been kidnapped for 3 days, this poor woman, in Australia, and raped and beaten, and so Baphomet put her back through that. And then he answered, she actually did this as a spell to speed things up. A lot of our magic was about speeding things up, like she had a van, so we asked that it wouldn't get stopped, the traffic lights would change for us. Anyway, she wanted her magic progress to go faster. Baphomet said, I'll show you what that feels like, and he put her through hours of everything speeded up, mental. So I stopped at this point messing with that particular group, but people continued. A good friend of mine decided to swear the oath of the babe of the abyss, and I said to him, you know, there's a story about this. There's a story about, this is where you decide you're going to basically storm heaven by whatever means. And there's a story of 4 rabbis who tried to do this. One goes blind, one goes mad, one dies, and one makes it. I told him this story. He said, well, that story is no use to me, which is rejecting a plot, which is already established. And I think we should take these things very seriously. He didn't take it very seriously, tried to slit his wrists, ended up on lithium. It was basically the end of his magical career. He's still with us.
He's fine now.
Yeah, he's great. But he's, is he practicing to do magic?
No.
Nah.
Those 2 things are connected.
So that was, I stopped doing that. Then I got into ayahuasca in a big way. Diamine in particular, it's a Catholic, syncretic ayahuasca religion, and there we are. And I want to talk a little bit about a couple of forms in this, ways of organising ourselves, because before I talked about rhyme, obviously, and rhythm. When we do it, we have a particular rhythm. It goes like this. Probably familiar. All day, marking out space. So we're doing a dance at the same time, so we're marking out space and time and rhyme because we're singing the whole time. Also geometry, we're moving around in this certain kind of geometry as well. So bringing order into, putting ourselves into order and sending our spells. Now, does this work? How does the magic work? Well, I'll tell you a nasty story. That was me as a younger man with leishmaniasis. I got bitten by a sandfly and got a parasitic infection and decided I wasn't going to treat it with medicine because I was busy writing a book. Where is that book, Ros?
Here.
Oh yeah. Busy writing a book about a bunch of stuff. I'll come back to it. That's what it turned into. I was ill for 8 months. I'll show you my scar later if you like. I had worms crawling out of my flesh on one occasion. Nasty. And there wasn't the only thing that was going on at this particular point in my life. I also lived next to a guy whose nickname was Leao. My name's Daniel. The poetry didn't escape me. I was Daniel in the lion's den. He made my life very, very difficult. Anyway, so it was all kind of going wrong, but I'd gone there with a very specific intention, a magical intention, if you like. I went there to learn the power of dining, and I also went there to finish a book. The book is obviously arranging symbols into order, and the idea of the book was about magic, and it was about pharmaceuticals, it was about independence, it was about all these kind of things. So I decided I wasn't going to treat it with the injections that I was told to, antimonium tartrate, 150, 190 injections into your veins. It's a heavy metal, I didn't want that. But everyone thought I was going to die because it attacks your cartilage in your nose and your ears afterwards, and yeah, it's pretty nasty. So what did I do? People said, here, you've got to take your medicine. So I drank a big dose of dining, and I sat and I went into a visionary state. And I was reminded of the intention I set, the first line of a poem. Go to Brazil, learn about dining. And here I had my ideal opportunity to learn about dining. And I was halfway through a plot. And you don't abandon a poem halfway through, do you? Or a spell halfway through. I also saw how it keyed into a whole bunch of different mythic themes there. So I was interested in Buddhism. Suffering forms a big part of Buddhism. It's the first noble truth. Christ on the cross, obviously. The Nigredo phase, everything bubbling up. Shamanism, the vision of dismemberment, and all of that jazz. In Daime we do a lot of purging, a lot of vomiting, right? So this felt very much like a purge. It made sense in terms of the story of my life, and it made sense in terms of the rhyme of what I'd arranged into order and what was coming back at me. So what happened? Well, I got ill for 8 months, and then I met this woman. And I was celibate at the time because I was ill. And so I encountered her. I was playing tarot cards at a particular event, and she comes up and she draws a card. It was the lover's card, so I immediately disabused her of any notion of romantic involvement with me because she looked quite keen. And I told her all about the mystical. It's about a choice in your life, blah blah blah. She followed me around for a couple of days. I thought she was a crackhead. I was completely paranoid at this point. She was quite skinny, and I was very paranoid. Anyway, she nursed me back to health. I got better. That's me with an axe. That's my scar. I got better. We went off to Bolivia because I'd run out of passport by that point, run out of visa. And in Bolivia, I went to the internet cafe, and two people had written to me saying they dreamt about me. I thought that was significant. Another person had written me saying how happy they were they just had a baby. Another person wrote to me saying how happy they were they just got pregnant. So I put my letters into order, sent an email to someone, and I said, do you think all my problems would be resolved if I went home and impregnated this woman? And I went back to the hostel. She opened the door and she said, do you have a child? And I went, yeah. And we did. She fell pregnant pretty much immediately. I'd only known her for a couple of months at this point. I'd lost 10 kilos. I'd been crazy and ill. What was I going to do? We went shopping in Bolivia. I bought her a tarot deck with all the cards were normal except for this one, which was the lover's card, which is printed a bit strange. There's a tarot deck, by the way. All the cards are normal except for that one. Again, a rhyme popping back from the magic. Now, the lovers has a second name, which is the twins. And about 12 months later, she gave birth to twins. Here they are. Both of them born with birthmarks just where my scar was. And I presented this to my curandero, and he said, oh, no, not yet. And he said to me, I said, look at my magic, look at this, amazing. And he said, I left a tag, did it? Because that kind of rhyme across the generations is absolutely normal in the context of, let's say, Amazonian shamanism. But I didn't come here to talk about that. I came here to talk about Goisha. So, I came back, I'd written my book, I'd done the hero's quest or whatever it was. I was expecting to come home to fame and fortune, and it didn't happen. Got home, I had a book written, but no one wanted to buy it. I had 2 kids, I had to start working really hard. And I thought, what should I do? Well, maybe I'll summon a demon. And I went to go and see Lon Milo Duquette about this, because he writes about this kind of thing, and he drew some cards for me. One of them was so the first operation he draws the Tower and the Three of Wands. He said, this is a fantastic combination. The Tower is a very potent symbol of creativity, and Three of Wands is its best pairing. It's cosmic womb, if you like, in the highest of the spheres. So that phallus, the Tower, is described by Crowley as a phallus shooting forth lightnings of seed. That's why it goes floppy afterwards. And so that was interesting, and then he dealt out some more cards, and in between, I hadn't told him what I was there for. I was there to say, should I do Goetia? And he dealt out some more cards. Tower, the Devil, and the Three of Wands came back again, another rhyme, and I said to him, should I be summoning a demon? He said, yeah. And I said, well, how do I do it? And he says, well, here, take a card. Take two cards, actually, of his ceremonial magic deck. So I did, and they had two demons on each, demon of the night, demon of the day. And he says, here, write these 4 demons down, go home and look them up in the grimoires, and see if anything jumps out at you, then you're on the wrong track. So I did. The 34th spirit is called Sabnock. He is a marquis, mighty, great and strong, appearing in the form of an armed soldier with a lion's head, riding on a pale-coloured horse. Now, I lived next door to a guy whose nickname was Leao at this point. Totally awful human being. He used to walk around with a machete and a rifle. I thought, oh, that's rather significant. Appearing on a pale-coloured horse. And I was writing a book on the apocalypse, and obviously the apocalypse has this figure, pale-coloured horse. His office is to build high towers, castles and cities, to furnish them with armour. There's the tower, by the way, that come up in the reading. And the tower is also the card of my birthday, if you add up all the numbers of my birthday. Also, he can afflict men for many days with wounds and with sores, rotten and full of worms. The Goetia means calling, and the question is, who calls who in these kind of things? I had no idea of any of this. Oh, Jesus Christ, this was quite scary. So I thought I had to get this guy under control. And so I did. So I called up my friend Nelson, who's a great, let's say, magician of Goetia, and he said, let's do a rite. So I did, I prepared the invocation. I did like this. I smoked a joint, started putting words together on a page, and kind of something came out of it. And the next day I did the same, something came out of it a little bit. On the third day, I wrote very, very fluidly a full invocation of Sabnock, which I'm going to perform for you here. And there is the seal of Sabnock. Now I'm going to need a little bit of help with this. And we're going to practice with this. In fact, if anyone for health reasons doesn't want to involve themselves in an invocation of the demon Sabnock at this point, just imagine yourself standing outside the door. You can still take part in it, but I don't want to drag you into this particular myth. I mean, I do want to, but you don't have to. But those who are going to be here, this is what you have to do. When I get to the end of the poem, I'm going to say, so mote it be, and you're going to say, so mote it be. So let's practice that. So mote it be.
So mote it be.
Yeah, very good. Now, the person who says this most quietly is going to be pursued by the demon Sabnock until the end of their day. And you don't want that. So I went to go and see my friend Nelson on an auspicious day. We performed the ritual ablutions, we created the seals, and then perhaps you'll join me in preparing the space. So, does anyone know which way east is? Which way? That way. Okay, so east is that way, people. So if you can all just join me by taking a nice deep breath all the way in. And breathing out. And as you breathe out, and as you continue to breathe, take your mind towards the east, which is that direction by the door. And as you do that, I'd like you to become aware of what the air is like, what the wind is like, and imagine the sound of the wind whipping around you, and imagine and feel what that does to your brain and to your thinking. You can imagine a sword standing erect in that direction as well, and we can welcome the Archangel of the East, Raphael. Bringing your attention over to the west, the opposite direction. Imagine the sound of the sea and the smell of the salt and the waves coming off the sea and that fluid feeling enveloping all of us. And you can imagine a cup coming out of the sea, and let us greet the angel of the west, Gabriel. Turning your attention to the south and imagining flame and fire and the smell of burning, and imagine that oppression on your skin as we welcome the angel of the south, Michael. And turning your attention up to the north, feeling the weight of your body pressing down on the earth beneath your feet, as we welcome the archangel with all the husks of the past and all the seeds of the future, Uriel. Would that souls could easily learn the lessons that a lesion lends. Flesh to dripping fluid turns, body quickens in defence, but putrefying acid burns. Ulcer opens, worse portends, blood to poison, flesh to worms, terror strikes and fear descends. What will has this companion? What life lives within this boil? What will with mine own will contends, and smites my skin to me in toil? Marquis Sabinock here attends, but where the foible of his foil? Why doth hell this torment send into my flesh, and take as spoil my self-made flesh? And so where ends the arc of my dominion? In truth we never end at all, as through the worlds a soul extends, where worlds cross, a crucible sits, and countless waters blend with fire blazing mutable. The archer draws the bow and sends a bolt to worlds more beautiful. Thus the weary soul transcends the limits of its prison. Thus does Sabinock make amends for shedding flesh, doth free the soul to his corporal Sabinock lends weapons that they may control and bind their will to greater ends, realize a higher goal. Hang the man, the soul ascends, for flesh is naught where will is all. As mage he is arisen. As once ye came by insect bite, so this night come ye peaceably. There within my soul's dark night I met thy task obediently. Worms did breed beneath thy blight and eat my tissues greedily. Cut forever that which tied my will to corporality, and thus I won my liberty. Come ye Sabinock, rend the veil, come without deformity. Deformed was I by your ordeal, thy kiss was my calamity, which broke mine own hermetic seal to purge a deep-held malady. 8 months did pass for it to heal, through dire and drawn-out purgatory. Hard won was my supremacy. This night Sabinock come as friend, clothed in crystal clarity, speak in ways we comprehend, familiar without enmity. With this working we suspend the habits of reality. Closed, our circle has no end. Let we all be one company, in unity, so mote it be.
So mote it be.
And then we took our attention over to the east, the blade in the east, the whipping air around it, and over to the west, and the sound of the sea, and the waves, and towards the south, which is that way, the flames and the fire, and bring your attention over to behind me, and back into your bodies, and back into the waves. And we closed up the right, and I went home. And by the time I got home, I could barely walk, because my guts had gone wrong, and I stayed in bed, not being able to move really, until I went to accident emergency, because it had all gone really, really badly wrong. And I hadn't finished writing the book of Sabinock yet. So I was there in accident emergency in the hospital, desperately scribbling away, my mum going, "What the hell is this you're writing?" Just taking me there because I couldn't walk. I then went and had a very demeaning mechanical operation done by a doctor, and then we left, and as I left I realised I didn't have the seal of Sabinock anymore. So I ran back into the hospital. I said, "Has anyone seen, that?" And I said, oh, I don't know, look around. And I looked in the bin where you put the stuff to incinerate, which is full of foul things and phlegm and bits of flesh and all that kind of stuff, which I thought was quite funny because if your demon doesn't do your bidding, what you do, you call him up again, you put his seal in a censer, fill it with foul things and threaten to burn it. So I didn't mean to threaten the spirit, but I did threaten the spirit. And yeah, I mean, I can walk now, everything's back in place. And I guess the point I want to make here is that Goetia, I mean, it's pretty heavy stuff. There's lawful and there's unlawful Goetia. There's lawful and there's unlawful magic. And obviously my background is chaos. What arises out of chaos is order. The beauty that arises out of chaos. And I would encourage us to look for the lines of poetry, pay attention to the story, and don't lose the plot. Thank you very much.